You know, it's really easy once you get elected and come to Washington, D.C., to put it in cruise control and just go along with the status quo. But that's not why I ran for Congress, and that's not why I came to Washington, D.C. As a matter of fact, I was one of the Americans in 2016 that looked at a presidential stage of 17 Republican candidates, and the only one that stood out to me was Donald John Trump, the very man that stood out and represented Republican voters and Americans all over the country that were sick and tired of a Republican establishment failing us over and over again. That's why I supported him in 2016. That's why I supported him in 2020. And that's why I support him now. But what happened when President Trump became president and the Republican majority in the House and the Republican majority in the Senate is the Republican establishment under Paul Ryan failed President Trump and failed the agenda that we wanted to get done. They passed a $1.3 trillion omnibus that did not fund the wall after we had stood at Trump rally after Trump rally and said, build the wall. They failed us. They funded the uniparty agenda. They funded the status quo that Washington, D.C. just wants to keep going and keep going. And you know what happened? That's why Republicans lost the midterms in 2018 and Nancy Pelosi became speaker. Republicans didn't fight. They allowed the Russia hoax. And then what happened when Democrats took over the House? It was impeachment number one, and the entire war against President Trump continued. And that war on President Trump is the war on the same voters today that are ready to go and vote for that man in November and put him in the White House in January. And that's exactly what is happening. He's winning poll after poll after poll because he's the only one fighting while Republicans in the House and Republicans in Washington continue to cave and be part of the uniparty. Mitch McConnell has a 6% approval rating for a reason. And that's because he's caved to the Democrats and continued the disgusting business model in Washington, D.C. that thrives on forever wars and thrives on building a bigger government and taking away the freedoms bit by bit by bit of Americans. Republican voters in America, Americans altogether, gave Republicans the House. They gave us the House in 2022. You want to know why? Because they were fed up with the Democrat agenda that is destroying this country. Wide open borders, an economy that's crashing, freedoms being stolen, COVID shutdowns, all the horrors that happened when Joe Biden took the White House and Democrats took full control. That's why we won the House in 2022. But what have we done with it? What are we giving Republican voters to vote for? President Trump is the reason why people are going to turn out in November. And I'm here fighting every single day to push my party to be a Republican-controlled majority that will fight and pass his agenda when he's in the White House in January. And right now, we are not that Republican majority. We have a speaker, Mike Johnson, that we all, by the way, I elected him. I voted for that man. So I have every right to be standing here. It wasn't a choice of America. It was a choice within our Republican conference. And I voted for Mike Johnson because his voting record before he became speaker was conservative. He voted against funding Ukraine. He was solidly pro-life. He voted to secure the border. He voted to fight against Democrats, fight against the witch hunt against President Trump. But once he became speaker, he has become a man that none of us recognize. He passed 3 continuing resolutions, and then he finally passed a 2-part omnibus that fully funded Joe Biden's agenda and the Democrat agenda, funded the Department of Justice that wants to put President Trump in jail for the rest of his life, which is a death sentence. Mike Johnson fully funded the FBI, which raided Mar-a-Lago, and he gave him a brand new building as a gift. Pro-life Mike Johnson funded full-term abortion clinics, funded the trans agenda on children that 70% of Americans are completely against on both sides of the aisle. And he fully funded Joe Biden's open border policies, the #1 issue in America. So I entered a motion to vacate, but I didn't call it for a vote. I was controlled. I was responsible. I was being conscious and caring about my conference and our majority. It was a warning to stop serving the Democrats and support our Republican conference and support our agenda. And he didn't do it. And we all went home. And Republican voters everywhere, Americans were raging at Mike Johnson. And he doubled down. He didn't change course. He continued. And when we came back, he reauthorized FISA. And he was the deciding vote himself to stop the warrant requirement of FISA. He voted it down. When only 6 months before that, before Speaker, he was for it. That was the second betrayal. And then we all went home and America raged, and I was still responsible. I was still patient, and I was still being careful with our Republican majority. And then we came back. And that's when Mike Johnson fully joined the disgusting business model of Washington, D.C. to fund forever wars. Yeah, that's what this is. The Uniparty is Make Ukraine Great Again. The Uniparty is all about funding every single foreign war. They think this is the business model that needs to be done. There you go. Set that up there. Let's do these guys up. Yeah, thank you. Americans do not want to send their hard-earned tax dollars to fund the murder and killing in foreign countries. They're fed up with it. And they're screaming it as loud as they possibly can. Our economy should not be built on the blood of wars in foreign countries. That's not what our economy should be built on. That's not how you grow jobs in America. That is horrific. It is evil and needs to end. But that's what the Uniparty does, and that's what they continue. Mike Johnson fully embraced it, and he funded $61 more billion to Ukraine. Funded a war in Israel while he funded Hamas in Gaza. How do you support Israel when you're funding Hamas? And gave more money away while our border stays open. And today, 300 Americans will die from fentanyl. Tomorrow, 300 Americans will die from fentanyl. And the next day, 300 more Americans will die from fentanyl poisoning because there's a war on America led by the cartels in Mexico. And nobody in Washington, D.C. gives a damn and has enough courage to face it. And Americans are sick of it. Sick and tired and fed up. And you want to know something? Nobody wants to rock the boat in Washington, D.C. Oh, no. That would be uncomfortable, Marjorie. We don't want to face the issues, Marjorie. Let's just wait and get through the election, Marjorie. Let's just assume President Trump is going to win, and we'll fix it next Congress, Marjorie. Well, I'm sorry. How many more Americans have to die? How many more dead American bodies have to pile up before the House of Representatives that's paid for by Americans' tax dollars actually does something about it? I want to know when this town is going to give a damn about Americans. And that's what this is really about. Well, there's one thing I know. There's one thing I know. If we get President Trump back in the White House in January of 2025, and we are lucky enough to earn the trust again from voters in America to have a Republican majority in this House of Representatives, we have a job to do. We cannot let people down again. We cannot fail President Trump. And this cannot happen. The MAGA agenda that I believe in, the Make America Great Again agenda that I support and Americans support, and the whole reason why Republicans are going to turn out and vote in November because they support President Trump, we need leaders in the House of Representatives that are going to get this done. Not working for Hakeem Jeffries, not working for Joe Biden, and not going to be twisted and lulled into keep continuing the disgusting practices of Washington, D.C. Mike Johnson is not capable of that job. He has proven it over and over again. Now we have Hakeem Jeffries and the Democrats coming out, embracing Mike Johnson with a warm hug and a big, wet, sloppy kiss. And they are ready to, they have endorsed him. They are ready to support him as speaker. They want to keep it going, keep the band together. Why? Because Mike Johnson is giving them everything they want. Everything they want. Every single thing they want. So it's really interesting to me. Hakeem Jeffries, it has gone through round after round of speaker votes, and we've all witnessed it, haven't we, America? And I want to tell you, I think it's good that America witnessed all of that. And the Democrats said his name over and over again. They said Hakeem Jeffries because they wanted to elect him speaker. Well, I find it very satisfying that they are ready to vote for Mike Johnson. And you want to know something? I want to see it happen. And I also want to see recorded votes. I think the American people, by the way, who I represent, I think the American people need to see a recorded vote of does Congress, does members of Congress support the uniparty? Is this what they support? I think every member of Congress needs to take that vote and let the chips fall where they may. And so next week, I am going to be calling this motion to vacate. Absolutely calling it. I can't wait to see Democrats go out and support a Republican speaker and have to go home to their primaries and have to run for Congress again, having supported a Republican speaker, a Christian conservative. I think that'll play well. I'm excited about it. And I also can't wait to see my Republican conference show their cards and show who we are, because voters deserve it. Is the Republican Party, have they finally learned their lesson? Have they finally heard the message from voters back at home? Are they willing to actually fight? Or are they going to just keep going along to get along? Because it's really easy to do that in Washington, D.C. I'm going to tell you, at over $34 trillion in debt, with millions and millions of people invading our country, an economy that I don't even know how is staying afloat, because every business owner I know has been suffering, and people fed up with the drama on television and fed up with the fighting and fed up with the bullshit from Washington, D.C., are ready for a Republican majority that's ready to support President Trump and his agenda in January of 2025. And I'm happy to deliver that vote for everyone next week.